We've just had the distinct opportunity of being in Colombia together as a team. We had about 40 or 50 of us in Colombia together, where we were with one of our former partners in Viva Cuenca and learning about the water fund and also spending time together, which is a rarity these days. Okay, so I have an overview presentation, and the presentation begins with this particular slide. And this is really what we're looking to achieve in the long term. We believe that there is roughly, and this slide is now outdated, about $1 trillion of investment that is going into traditional grey infrastructure for water. We don't believe that these investments are actually in the interest of securing water for downstream users, beneficiaries, and cities. And we think that there's a different way of doing this. And so we are trying to push a paradigm shift in the water sector, which will probably take us and yourselves and the entire community that sort of believe in this vision at least a generation or two to do. And you'll see on the right-hand side of this graph that there is less than a thousandth of that investment equivalent going into green infrastructure, or what we term at-scale nature-based solutions. We believe that at-scale nature-based solutions is really the long-term fix for improved water security, among other things. So our mission really here is to bridge a market failure. About 5 years ago, we went on a journey with between the Nature Conservancy and Pegasus to understand a market failure in advising local champions in creating watershed investment programs. Watershed investment programs, or WIPs, is the term that we give to a way of working in a particular catchment, in a watershed, in a delineated area, river basin, that yields water for communities, for cities, for areas of interest that are important. And we want to improve the water security of those communities and areas. And so what we saw is we found local champions, we found local partners who live in those watersheds. They understood that they needed to go upstream of where they were getting their water from. They needed to go into areas such as source water areas, and they needed to improve the degraded lands and environments, and they needed to change practices for managing those lands, managing farming practices and industry and forests and the like. But they didn't know how to do this. And so, sometimes they stumbled upon creating their own scope of work to get advisors in to do various things, but really the end-to-end services to do this across the board and create a long-term systemic change in those catchments wasn't available. So we created what we call a centralized client-minded team called Nature for Water. We have the technical capabilities. We have also track record, much of which that has come from the Nature Conservancy's more than 20 years of developing water funds and payment for ecosystem services schemes to complete these activities, and importantly, to have the client at the heart of what we do, so be a real partner. We've got technical assistance in many ways, including typical project management and stakeholder facilitation, as well as a whole host of technical services such as ecology, nature-based solutions, best practice, hydrology, information systems, and importantly, financial and economic appraisal. And that enables us to create business cases and a whole host of other things that can help with the launch of long-term investment programs. The Nature for Water focuses on mainstreaming nature-based solutions to address water security outcomes, to address those challenges and to realize outcomes. On the left-hand side, some of the water security challenges we're looking to address are flood risk, water quality, water scarcity, and these are challenges that often come all together. And so here, in terms of water security, how do we define it? According to the IUCN here, availability of an acceptable quantity and quality of water for health, livelihoods, ecosystems, and production, coupled with an acceptable level of water-related risks to people, environments, and economies. And at-scale nature-based solutions is the technical solution by which we believe we can respond to water security. It's not the silver bullet, but it is indeed a paradigm shift in terms of how we think about providing water and the right kind of water and the right seasonality of water to those people and ecosystems. And this is about leveraging nature and the power of healthy ecosystems to protect people, optimize infrastructure, and safeguard a stable and biodiverse future. We do this in the form of what we call watershed investment programs, as I mentioned. And the diagram on the left-hand side is something that the Nature Conservancy developed. It's their water funds diagram, and this indicates that we go upstream. We unite with public, private, and civil society stakeholders upstream, including local communities and farmers, around a common goal and a common vision to deliver water security, both upstream and downstream. And so this is fundamentally different to end-of-pipe infrastructural solutions. This is about creating a long-term program, really emphasis here on the long term. Almost all of our watershed investment programs are designed into perpetuity. So they're not designed as projects with a beginning and a sunset after 3 years or 5 years, but we want to create long-term mechanisms, which include not just funding, but the right kind of organizational, institutional, and governance mix, and importantly, what we call collective action. So collective action is an initiative whereby we get multiple stakeholders who wouldn't otherwise have worked together to come to the party and over many years choose to buy into a vision and be partners to deliver at-scale nature-based solutions. Importantly, I want to mention that Nature for Water is a critical technical assistance arm of the Nature Conservancy's Resilient Watershed Strategy framework. As part of TNC's strategy here, they have 3 pillars, flagship programs where they really put emphasis and effort behind key flagship programs, most notably the Greater Cape Water Fund in this instance, and the Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund. These are 2 flagship programs. One of their flagship programs, the Quito Water Fund in Ecuador, is turning 25 years old next year. Another one is partnerships and policy. So they are a fantastic engine to create, develop, and grow partnerships. And so we have multiple partnerships now that form part of an alumni network where we get to learn across multiple watershed investment programs, payment for ecosystem services, and the like. And finally, a lot of capacity development. So how do you build the right capacity as local partners to do long-term structures particularly well? And this is something where the sharing across partnerships is useful. So Nature for Water has 3 core focus areas. We work within these 3 areas. The first is program preparation. This is the preparation of watershed investment programs. Secondly, after watershed investment programs are prepared, we can support with implementation. And so that's after it's been launched and there's execution, either in physical infrastructure and or in best management practices. And I'll talk a little bit more to that soon. And then finally, in knowledge management and learning, which is something which we're increasingly growing. So project preparation involves specifically developing the watershed investment program. And that begins with pre-feasibility. And that's where we want to really understand what is the water security challenge that we're trying to address. That is a question that we ask ourselves right the way through the process. It can take from pre-feasibility to the launch of a watershed investment program a minimum of 2 years and a maximum of 4 or 5 years. It really does depend, but that is a question that we ask right the way through the process. We begin asking it in pre-feasibility. We want to make sure we really understand the challenge we're dealing with and that every solution and long-term structure is ultimately supporting and responding to that challenge. We also understand the key stakeholders that we're dealing with. And increasingly, as we move through the program preparation phases here, for example, in feasibility, we try and understand who are the audiences that we are making a case to here, who might support this in the long term, either in kind through support from their staff or in actual dollars that are needed to get the programs funded, kicked off, and working in the long term. And we do that through return on investment analyses, which we call financial and economic appraisals. And so we create nature-based solutions sets that respond to our challenges. We develop appraisals that evaluate the return on investment, and we make a very clear and compelling business case to those who might support this in the long term. That is, of course, only if the watershed investment program is feasible. And we do see quite a lot of attrition through our processes from, for example, 10 water funds that might kick off pre-feasibility, perhaps only 7 make it through to feasibility, 4 or 5 make it through to design, and only 3 or 4 are launched. And that attrition is important because we need to be convinced objectively that these watershed investment programs can launch and be genuinely perpetual. I will mention on this particular slide that we provide these services in 2 ways. We have a call for proposals once a year, and that will be in Nature for Water's time to sponsor an engagement, one of the phases, either pre-feasibility, feasibility, or design. And then we also have fee-based partnerships. This is a way that you can kind of skip the queue of our call for proposals, and you can come to Nature for Water directly, where you have your own resources to pay for our services directly. So that's program preparation. When we've prepared a program and when we've launched a program, we can provide implementation support. And this really does bridge the gap between, a newly launched program and programs that can stand on their own 2 feet, both in terms of their funding ability and also their capacity to run a program into the long term. So capacity building to local partners is absolutely critical. That's what we focus on. We look at implementation scaling. So how do you actually take our feasibility assessment and the design that's been created for the prioritization of nature-based solutions and then go and develop that in the field? We provide program intelligence and reporting. That's financial. That's all kinds of systems that are giving us decision support. We provide governance support and build out. We help organizations create steering committees, other kinds of governance structures for efficient decision making. And we help organizations build capacity internally in the right kind of capacity. And finally, we provide strategies around acquiring sustainable funding so that these watershed investment programs can indeed sort of bridge that gap that I mentioned up front. We do this in 2 ways. As with program design, we have a pro bono sponsored support window here that's called Ground Outcomes Fund, or the GO Fund. And this is where we provide both sub-granting to actually go into the field, use that capital and develop nature-based solutions, be those physical or best management practices. And we also provide fee-based partnerships. And that is where we come alongside and we provide support to organizations that might have their own resources to do this, but need more know-how. In both instances, we provide that know-how. We provide technical support alongside our partners. So that's program development and implementation support. We also have knowledge management. Knowledge management is an absolutely critical pillar of everything we're doing, and that's because we take quite a humble disposition here that we are alongside yourselves as well, learning about this field. We certainly haven't figured it out, and so feedback loops is really critical in terms of what we do. Every time we develop a product, we've completed a phase, we work with a local partner in the field. We want to learn about our lessons and we want to adapt the advisory we provide across the board. And so we've got a whole host of systems and processes and communications internally. We have folks who are full-time designated to knowledge and learning internally. And we provide training for our staff that ensures that we are banking the latest information and lessons. We also have significant external communication with clients and with the community of practice, including yourselves. Our information that we develop per the policies of the Nature Conservancy is open source. And so we share a lot of our knowledge products on TNC's Resilient Watersheds Toolbox. You can go and have a look at that now. And we also provide training to external partners. I have created a bit of a snip here from the Nature-based Solutions Invest team at the World Bank. We are currently developing bespoke training for them on that, and that's something we can do as well. So we have a team that does training internally and externally. We can do that in a sponsored way if it's something that supports our local partners directly. We can also do that in a fee-based partnership way where you pay for bespoke and direct training. And maybe just to be very clear, we provide training on nature-based solutions, but the at-scale component, landscape scale nature-based solutions, and for the development of long-term structures, most notably what we call watershed investment programs. Since 2022, which was our inception in January, we've supported 35 watershed investment programs. And this gives you a sense of where we're working. Notably, we have 50% or more in Africa, which has been a significant continental shift for us from the Americas over the last 20 years into Africa, which is really growing in the need for these mechanisms to respond to critical water security challenges. And if we just look at the program summary, and this is a busy slide, but I wanted to show you here that, as I said, Africa tends to be the region with the most number of watershed investment programs. Water quality is the water security challenge that we're most likely to be addressing, particularly nutrients and pollutants in water. And then very many have erosion and sedimentation turbidity as the challenge we're trying to fix. You would have noted in a picture early on that one of our colleagues was in the Black Volta holding up a water bottle that was completely murky. And the Black Volta was called the Black Volta actually because it was clear. And you could see right through to the black bottom of the river. And so, things have changed dramatically over the last few decades. And then we have agricultural best management practices being, the most significant nature-based solutions implementation set we tend to apply. We do a lot of habitat protection. Protection is a big element, both active and passive restoration through protection. And then responding to challenges with wetlands and revegetation is critical as well. Most of our engagements, we've had more than 50 projects to date, have been at a feasibility level, and that's where we undertake a technical feasibility assessment and then provide a business case if it's feasible. And what we've seen of late is many of our clients are local NGOs and government agencies who have a mandate to operate. We are increasingly looking to grow our client base of water utilities in particular, because they tend to have an ability to support watershed investment programs in the long term. So how do we work together with local partners? Every watershed investment program is different. There is no copy and paste in what we do. The processes and approaches that we make use of are fairly standard, but again, there's no copy and paste in the actual program implementation that's required. On the top left, we've got this concept of launching de novo programs. Those are programs where nothing currently exists. So we build a program from the beginning, from the bottom up. Good examples of those on Black Volta in Ghana, on the west of Ghana, and in Norfolk on the east of England, where we came in as a partner and helped those particular programs develop from the beginning. The top right, we've got direction setting for well-resourced programs. That's where programs have implementation resources, but they don't know how to create the long-term structures. So we come in as an organization that specializes in creating investment programs and creates direction setting and ensures that all of the right components of a long-term structure are in place. In the bottom, strengthening existing programs. So there might be existing programs that are in some form of implementation or need to be implemented, and they require specific structures, standard operating procedures, financial models to ensure that they're strengthened, they're able to run more effectively or efficiently, or they want to validate what they currently do. We can also help deploy development finance into watershed investment programs or into critical areas, as we've done in Angola with Reclima and AFD and the World Bank. And then we have a number of clients in corporate water stewardship, which can be, for example, against replenishment targets, where we're working, as an example, in Nigeria, in the Ogun and Osun river basins, doing pre-feasibilities and options analyses for the Coca-Cola Foundation. So these are some of the ways in which we can support local partners to develop watershed investment programs or to strengthen existing ones. In terms of staffing, how do we show up? The Nature for Water engagement team is on the left-hand side. Importantly, we have a tripartite leadership structure. That means there are 3 individuals who lead every project that we have. We have a science lead, who's the sciences expert that undertakes biophysical modeling. hydrological and maybe hydraulic modeling as well, depending on what's required. We have an engagement manager who's responsible for stakeholder, institutional, and governance arrangements, as well as the financial and economic appraisal of the Watershed Investment Program. And then we have a local lead, a local partner. This is the local champion. This is usually an individual that has been mandated by their respective organization to run and develop a watershed investment program. And these three individuals are responsible for the delivery of the watershed investment program. And we show up to deliver a particular phase alongside this individual. So we come on as an extension of their team. We have an engagement oversight, which is responsible for the project. And we also have a technical director who provides technical direction to the science lead to make sure that it's the right kind of sciences and modeling approach that's necessary to solve the water security challenge. We have an expanded team here around science associates and engagement consultants that provide the support to the leads of the engagement. And we have a growing network of subject matter experts that can be pulled upon if we need a particular deep dive into something, for example, wetland ecology in East Africa. Here's our organogram. It's a consultancy delivery model with an impact mandate. So we've structured it such that it can respond to our impact mandate around outcomes in watershed investment programs. We have an independent advisory board whom I'll introduce shortly. We are co-managed by the partners and the parent organizations, Nature Conservancy and Pegasus. And we rely on a blended team with multidisciplinary skills. And importantly, as I mentioned previously, a co-leadership model. Our independent advisory board is not a fiduciary board. It's an advisory board. It's a technical advisory board. And these are the individuals who are holding us to account to make sure that the opportunity setting for Nature for Water is accurate. And we're thinking both in terms of how we're effective tomorrow, as well as in the decades to come. So we are increasingly pressed to put 5-year business plans down for the facility, as well as think about the opportunities in 20 years around how Nature for Water can respond to the market and support the water sector to make this critical paradigm shift. There's representation on Nature for Water's advisory board from folk who have previously represented development finance institutions, individuals who are currently leading big country level knowledge exchange. A good example is Waterworks and Blue Deal and how they learn from developed economies utilities and how they can support the operations of utilities in developing economies and countries. We have venture philanthropy on our board that holds us to account in terms of thinking about the growth of the organization. And if we are having the right levers internally to maximize outcomes. We have academics who create strategic programs in academia around the nexus of water and carbon and energy and agriculture. We also have representation from the Green Climate Fund's chair of independent technical advisory panel, who is supporting us in thinking about how we can contribute to climate adaptation among other important themes in climate finance. And we have donors, both from corporate foundations and individual donors who hold us to account. Why is Nature for Water different? And I think this is probably one of the most important slides. So, first and foremost, we've broken this up into what is different, how are we different, and why be different? And I think ultimately the what and the how contribute to the why. And so what is actually different about Nature for Water? First and foremost, we're demand-driven as an organization. We've created a structure in the organization that enables us to respond to demand. So as the market grows and as the market needs these services, we have a structure that can effectively scale. And importantly, the structure we have is designed to meet client needs. So it's not necessarily responding to a distinct scope only, but actually meeting needs and supporting what the client needs in the long term. Secondly, we're also scoping allies. And so every single engagement we take on as Nature for Water, we scope with the local partners directly. We typically don't take a scope on, sign off on a scope and start delivering it. We develop the scope with the client directly. And thirdly, we're a team that has distinct, multi-skills and a co-leadership model that enables us to really tackle wicked nexus challenges. We've got a couple of watershed investment programs where food, energy, and water security are three things we're looking to solve on. So we're able to do that with our multidisciplinary team and our subject matter experts. So how are we different? Our advisory is very much entirely delivered through our local partners. So we're an extension of the local teams. And that's really critical. So there's an important line between ourselves owning a project and them owning the project. Ultimately, they own the project, and we want to make sure that they've got the right skills and know-how to develop the project over the long term. We provide a continuity of care in our services, so we don't just deliver a project like a feasibility assessment or a business case and say, here it is, guys, good luck. We continue to support after that. Because of the generous donations that we've received, we're able to help our local partners get the next resources to further develop and launch their programs. And that kind of continuity of care is, we've learned that is something that they really value, and enables programs to be developed and actually implemented a lot quicker than they typically are. And under the theme of Kaizen, we proactively learn, as I mentioned, through dedicated resources in Nature for Water, and we provide feedback to each of our teams on regular intervals. At least every month, we're learning something new and adapting our how-to in terms of watershed investment program design and build. And ultimately, we want to become owners' agents. So we're doing this so that we are incentivized to work alongside our local partners and deliver outcomes. We are being held to account by our independent advisors on outcomes of our local partners' watershed investment programs. And so that's how we show up as partners and become kind of their owner's agent. We have an impact dashboard. And so what we've developed alongside our typical structures for doing the work that we do is a dashboard that keeps track of our outcomes and impacts of the local partner watershed investment programs. I believe the dashboard is open source as well, so you can have a look at the watershed investment programs that we've loaded to the dashboard. And then the idea is that we will track their efficacy in reaching outcomes and impacts over time. There are a number of outcomes and impacts that I will talk to in a bit. I will just touch on very briefly the road ahead. This is the last component of the presentation, and then I'll pause there. So we have validated the founding thesis of Nature for Water, which is that we believe that there was a supply side market failure with the development of watershed investment programs. This is something that we believe we validated through the demand that's come out and the kind of demand that we've seen. Going forward in terms of 2025 to 2030, we are looking to continue to set the standard around developing watershed investment programs at scale nature-based solutions, and thereby inspire additional demand from the water sector. And we want to inspire demand in particular areas, for example, as mentioned, among water utilities, mandated authorities, etc. And this is something that we plan on doing in three kinds of ways. First and foremost, we are trying to build our strategy to focus on Asia as well. You would have noticed that Asia, we only had 3 engagements in Asia. And this is something that we know is really important. Around 60% of the global population in Asia, and 21 megacities, more than 60% of the global growth in megacities in Asia. And so Asia is obviously really critical, and it will certainly help us further validate if watershed investment program services provider support is required indeed across this region. Secondly, we are interested in developing out asset management, and this is where we've seen increasing interest in assets being the things that we don't typically value in the market. Biodiversity markers, land and water, various things that we believe aren't currently valued but increasingly are being valued. And we think that this will enable us to help our local partners take their watershed investment programs to the market and potentially look at funders of outcomes and various other alternative assets that will enable those programs to receive more capital and become more financially sustainable in the long term. And finally, the last A as part of our long-term strategy is archetypes. That is where we recognize that there are critical verticals in what's required. So either we're responding to a particular water security challenge, it could be alien invasive removal. This is something we're seeing across 4 or 5 watershed investment programs at the moment. And we are learning increasingly as to how to do that through spread models and various other methods of eradication that don't further deteriorate the lands in which alien invasive plant species exist. And so that's a good example where we're responding in a particular way. Other examples include how we mobilize smallholder farmers across areas where we've got hundreds of thousands of smallholder farmers that need to become our local implementers. Other examples include different kind of governance structures that support implementation. Again, this is about us going deeper into the how of watershed investment programs. At the moment, we're calculating donor leverage at this stage of 1 to 50, and that's fairly conservative. This is built off ourselves having supported more than 100 watershed investment programs by 2030, and looking at about 60 of those programs being truly sustainable in the long term, recognizing that our programs are modeled on a 30 years, but they're designed to be in implementation perpetually. And so if you look at about 60 programs, over the course of the next 30 years or so, we should see donor leverage at about 50 to 1, because programs tend to require $25 million over a 30-year period to be operational and properly maintained. And we're currently working off a donor base of about $24 million. The final slide here is on our impact estimates. Again, we've used the intelligence that I just presented on the previous slide to build out what we might contribute to by the end of 2030 and 2035. And these are important because these marry up with the Nature Conservancy's 2030 goals and targets around some of these things, including land with improved management, rivers with improved management, people with improved climate adaptation and directly improved livelihoods, and water replenished or returned. And many of these are quite conservative. We have, as I mentioned, a dashboard and program intelligence, which helps us track this over the long term. And that is the end of the presentation. I think it took slightly longer than originally planned, but hopefully it was useful.
Thank you very much, Mike, for a very comprehensive, very well illustrated, very clear presentation. And I have been monitoring the questions. If you have a question during the question and answer period, please put it in the chat. I will track it and call on you. So I'll turn to the first question here from Sebastian Burke. The question is, we're in the position to have 17 case studies with fully established nature-based solutions scalability plans. Is there a chance to have the Nature Conservancy actively interacting with MERLIN cases to bring scalability plans into life?
Thank you, Sebastian. If I've understood your question correctly, and specifically what the opportunity is here, the short response is yes. And it's obviously not clear yet from the question whether these particular plans are at a program development, a program design stage. That's the preparation phase that I mentioned, or in implementation. So what kind of support they require. As mentioned, if they're at the program development phase and you're looking for the how-to in terms of scalability, that is something that yourselves can actually do through our sponsored engagement window, our call for proposals, or yourselves can come to us directly if it's fee-based. In other words, you have the resources to do that with ourselves directly now. If there's an implementation support component, and you're looking at the scalability of those plans, the how-to in implementation, and you're looking for something that's quite tangible and practical on the ground, you can also apply to our GO fund, our Ground Outcomes Fund, where it's not just our technical advisory in terms of scalability, but also sub-granting to prove scalability in reality. Yeah.
The next question, a bit pedestrian, but quite important, and that is, would it be possible to make the slides available to MERLIN case study leaders?
Yes, I believe so.
Fine. The next question from Sebastian Burke again. In your opinion, why is there little engagement in continental Europe? Responsible public agencies not used or afraid to cooperate with NGOs?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I must say right up front, I'm probably not best within my organization, that being the Nature for Water, and within Nature Conservancy, to actually respond to that. For starters, the Nature Conservancy is not new to Europe, but it doesn't have a significant footprint, and is increasingly learning about the background, the context of Europe. We had significant engagement with European utilities when we did a utility demand mapping back in 2020. There appeared to be a lot of interest in Nature for Water and the how-to of creating these long-term watershed investment programs. That being said, let me give you an example of what we recently received in our most recent call for proposals window. So we ran that at the beginning of this year. We had 75 completed applications. Not a single application came through from Europe. 59 of them came through from Africa. So that just gives you a sense for who's looking after these applications and what they need. What we find is Europe is quite a structured market already. We find that there are policies, there are mandates around how water utilities and managed authorities show up. And every square inch of land tends to be mapped and tends to have very significant plans and policies associated with it, such that I think it's such a well-structured environment that it makes ourselves coming in to do something at scale and collective quite daunting. And we also find that utilities don't really have the right capacity to look out for our call for proposals and to know and be incentivized to engage ourselves in creating watershed investment programs and collective action mechanisms. We have had some interest from utilities recently on a fee-based partnership basis, but what we don't find is significant. We don't find local partners and authorities and NGOs and the like who are actively reaching out to ourselves to do this. So that's a fairly weak response to your question. As I noted up front, the caveat here is I'm more of a specialist in Africa, which is my background, than I am in Europe.
The next question comes from Emmanuel Cohen-Shaham. Has the IUCN Global Standard for Nature-based Solutions been implemented and useful in your work for planning, implementing, assessing, or upscaling nature-based solution interventions?
That's a great question, and you'll have to jog my memory. I did see something come out fairly recently. I think it was in the last year, maybe a year and a half, from IUCN. And in that particular instance, and Manuela, you might want to actually put that into the chat when that was most recently released, whether it was a 23 or 24 publication. We did take that particular publication. I did see something from IUCN and integrated with what we call our how-to guide. So Nature for Water created a how-to guide in 2021, and that is a how-to around pre-feasibility, feasibility and design, and to some extent execution phase, which is implementation support. We then asked our knowledge, learning and impact manager to take the IUCN standard that we saw and cross-reference that with what we've got in the how-to guide to improve it. We are, as I say, in year 4 of using our how-to guide, so we are likely to take the standards that we see across the board, and we've probably seen 3 or 4 come out in the last year, and update our how-to guide over the course of the next year. So the short answer is no, I can't reference the IUCN global standard directly. We haven't used it directly. We use our how-to guide, but we are looking at how we might implement, cross-reference and integrate those standards with what we've got.
And the final question I have is again from Sebastian Berg. Can you provide an example of how a successful application needs to be designed to receive Water for Nature support?
And by example, we have a number of webinars where we actually run through the application itself, Sebastian. So we go through the application, we explain what we're specifically looking in the different areas, maybe a couple of call outs from the application. First and foremost, it's really important that the local partner, the applicant, is able to explain the water security challenge well. That's something that often comes through because of the nature of ourselves working across landscape scale. Hundreds of thousands of hectares sometimes. There's multiple challenges in watersheds that local partners really struggle to explain in a very clear and compelling way. And so, first and foremost, do you understand your water security challenge really well? And where specifically does that show up? And whom specifically? Is it a city? Is there farmer groups, other private sector organizations? Who specifically is suffering from this challenge, and how compelled are they to realize a long-term solution? So that's the first thing. Secondly, if you have targeted specific nature-based solutions and identified the ones that you feel are likely to work, are you able to talk to those? The more confidently you can talk to those in a practical way, the likely we're able to come on board and support and take things forward effectively. Oftentimes we get applications that don't have a very clear water security challenge or challenges, and they don't know which nature-based solutions are likely to support in those catchments. So that's a very early stage pre-feasibility level. But even then, we're not likely to take applications forward that aren't able to at least talk to those elements to some degree of confidence. Finally, I think just something to really add, there are some enabling conditions that are really important. The three enabling conditions that are particularly important here. First and foremost, we need to be convinced that we are going to maintain or improve biodiversity in the particular area that we're working. Biodiversity is absolutely critical to the Nature Conservancy, but also we believe biodiversity over the long term directly improves water in every possible way: quality, quantity, seasonality, predictability. So biodiversity is a critical enabling condition, and we do find that many applications don't talk particularly explicitly to biodiversity. Secondly, local partner time is really important. Oftentimes we find that we are being called in as a consultant to deliver a report, and some folk believe we can go away for 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, do a report without their input, and come back and deliver the report. And that's not how we work. We work with our local partners. We're on calls with them 2 or 3 times a week. We're in their catchments every second or third month, working with them as local partners and their constituents in their respective catchments. And so we need to be convinced that local partners have at least a third of their time available to work with us directly. And finally, the other enabling condition that's really important is funding. And so it's helpful when an applicant comes and says, there's potential funding down the line. I've identified 2 or 3 forms of funding here, and we are trying to unlock that funding through a very clear business case to these possible funders, financiers, and investors. And so it's very difficult if they come in an application and say, we don't know what funding exists, we don't know what opportunities might exist, and we don't know how to bring about a business case here to the right audience to receive funding. So those are the enabling conditions that are really important: biodiversity, significant level of effort of local partner, and potential sustainable funding opportunities that a business case is likely to leverage.
So as you were answering that question, first Emmanuel Cohen-Shacham pasted into the chat the main global standard for nature-based solutions document from the IUCN for anyone who's interested. And there was a question also that came in from Marie-Isabelle Lenz, and it's 2-part. First, thank you for the presentation, Mike. Would you also assist in the call for proposal or GoFund branch any smaller organizations or agency to build a consortium to design a watershed scale program? That's the first part. And I'll ask the second part so you don't have to think of 2 at the same time.
Yeah, thank you, Marie-Isabelle. That's a fantastic question. And the short answer is yes, absolutely. In fact, building the right consortia to undertake watershed scale programs is a big part of what we do. It's the governance arm of what we do. So we undertake institutional assessments, and then we look specifically at governance. Who specifically might need to form part of a steering committee to drive the build out and establishment of a watershed investment program. And then once we do that, there's a whole host of analyses we do on the right kind of legal structures and long-term structures to ensure that the key representatives are sitting on the right governing bodies to do that. Developing those consortia right at the beginning are critical. Oftentimes we have organizations, NGOs and the like on the ground that are quite small, and they come to us and they have a strong desire to create impact in this environment, to build these watershed investment programs. They're completely compelled that this is the right thing that they want to do, but they don't have the local water authority, water utility, other critical constituents that have a mandate around water, and others who make use of the water as part of their consortia. And that's something we can talk to and we can mention in terms of what we believe in a particular area might be the right mix to ensure you've got the right kind of buy-in, but also capacity to implement.
In case you didn't cover that in the first part, the second part seems related. It's what are the key prerequisites that would be key for a local partner to qualify for your call for proposals, for example, mandate within the catchment?
Yeah, this is a great question. We are actually revisiting our fourth call for proposals prerequisites and evaluation criteria at the moment. So I would say take everything I say with a pinch of salt today. What's been important recently and in our last CFP, which is available online, you can see some of the evaluation criteria online there. But importantly, I think you alluded to it in your first question, we are looking for consortia. In the past, what we've seen, as we say, is a very small, maybe local NGO has developed a lot of interest in what we do. They've come to us directly instead of forming their consortia first. And we find that particularly difficult because if we build a long-term watershed investment program, of course, we're going to need the mandated authorities and players in those regions who might fund this in the long term and or might be interested in affected parties to be part of this. And so one of the prerequisites is that you engage water utilities, local authorities and the like, and bring them in as part of a consortia prior to applying. And so we can also help you understand who that might be in your particular watershed and catchment. Other prerequisites, as I mentioned before, is you need to be able to talk to biodiversity value clearly. That's just something that is not just important because it's Nature Conservancy, but we believe that biodiversity value is a critical vector in driving long-term water security. We are increasingly making the link between biodiversity value in 6 parts. We're developing a framework at the moment, and between that and water security for the long term, in addition to agricultural security and food security and energy security and the like. Biodiversity value is not just an add-on, it's not a bolt-on, it is absolutely intrinsic in everything that we do to respond to water security challenges. So I would just say that whilst it's not down as a prerequisite, it will certainly help your application be particularly effective in evaluation.
So oops. I was almost going to say goodbye, and then immediately another question comes in from Marie-Isabelle Lenz. Thank you, Mike. How long is the Nature for Waters facility support of partners through the GoFund branch?
That's a great question. So the Ground Outcomes Fund runs for a period anything between a year and 3 years. And that's because we believe that it takes that amount of time to provide technical support and sub-grants into implementation to enable those organizations that have perhaps just launched to go through that, what we call the valley of death, to go through, build the capacity, prove through implementation that these solutions can actually be integrated in the landscape and even possibly even effective. And so that period is 1 to 3 years where we provide GoFund support. As I said, it's sub-granting of monies that can be used for implementation, as well as our in-kind technical assistance.
Okay. At the moment, I don't see any questions coming in, so I want to again have a very special thank you for such short notice to come through with such an excellent presentation for us. We're extremely grateful for that. In the German-speaking world, we have a saying that when someone is completely on top of a subject, they just kind of have to shake their sleeve and it'll come falling out. And you very elegantly shook your sleeve and it all came rolling out very, very fluently. So thanks again. Astrid, when is the next December webinar?
Yeah, the December webinar will be on December 2nd, and it will deal with the regional scalability plans that were created by our case studies, and it will be given by colleagues from Syke and Deltares. So December 2nd, 3 p.m.
Great.
And thanks, Mike, also from my side for this excellent presentation.
Thank you, Astrid. Thanks, Jan.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you to the listeners and the questions that came through.